welcome. I'm Sarah Wright. I'm with the Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare, and we're one of the Colorado groups hosting tonight's events. Our partners in this initiative include Arvadans for Progressive Action, the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, Healthcare for All Colorado, Healthcare for All, Democratic Socialists of America Denver and Fort Collins, Physicians for a National Health Programs Colorado chapter, and Cooperate Colorado. And we are pleased to welcome Together Colorado's Health Committee to our coalition. We've come together because we have an urgent need to pass the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act now. And we want to thank the Colorado's Act's co-sponsors, U.S. Congressman Joe Negusson and Perlmutter. So the next thing is just giving you, and one other thing is to give a special thank you to Physicians for a National Health Programs National Organization, as some of the materials that we're using for our campaign came from them with their permission. So this is the lineup, just so you have kind of a sense of what to expect. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act. We're going to be putting some of the links that are going on all throughout this talk into the chat. We will also email you this slideshow. It'll include the links. And so we'll go through several speakers who we'll introduce. We'll get to the action items, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. So our groups have partnered to pass the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act, sponsored in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House by Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Pramila Jayapal. The act would harness Medicare to pay all the out-of-pocket healthcare costs for those with health insurance, and all the healthcare bills for those without insurance for the duration of the pandemic. This act's passage would mean everyone in America could afford healthcare now. So to speak to the urgency, because we know people are hurting out there, I'd like to welcome Madeline Jacobs, MD, and I'm going to ask her to unmute and pin her video. Maddie retired from her rural family practice when she realized that reforming our broken healthcare system was the best way she could really help her patients. She works long hours leading her local Health for All group in Canyon City, Colorado, and making a difference for the cause, one conversation and event at a time. Welcome, Maddie.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see this number of people on the call. So the crisis in healthcare in America has been evolving for many years and is now magnified by the pandemic. Many healthcare providers are suffering moral injury and PTSD. A 2018 report showed that physicians had a higher suicide rate than combat veterans, and that too has accelerated with the pandemic. Patients too are suffering. This message was left on our Push to Pass event page, and it says so much. Quote, "Thank you so much. I'm in such trouble now, you can't imagine." I was moved to work for universal healthcare reform by the increasing tragedies I was seeing in my practice. For example, 3 people between the ages of 50 and 65 died from colon cancer in my last year of practice because they couldn't afford colonoscopies. A friend lost her vision due to a bleed in her eye from hypertension when she couldn't afford to see a doctor despite working 3 jobs. Another with chronic health problems never knew if she would qualify for Medicaid from month to month. She's now on Medicare and so no longer needs to worry if she can get health care. And now people are losing their access to health care and teetering on the brink of homelessness and hunger because they've lost their jobs. They're reluctant to get care due to cost, entering the system when in crisis and at times too late. The Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act would remedy this. People are in trouble, as are participant said, and their cries for help have been falling on deaf ears. The solutions are sitting in Congress. We need to do what we can to get them passed. Options for action will be presented here, and you can have a voice and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Doctors Robert and Denise Davis, I'm going to go ahead and pin you and put you in the hot seat. And Dr. Denise Davis is a guest that we weren't expecting, so I don't have a whole bio for you, although I'm sure yours is just as long as your husband's. Vice President at Large for the Greater Metro Denver Ministerial Alliance, Dr. Robert Davis is a family life specialist with more than 20 years experience as a senior pastor, family life educator, hospital chaplain, and bereavement coordinator. He inspires congregations and organizations to function as a healthy family using ethnic and cultural strengths. He's also involved with community policing and social justice reform efforts, including Denver's recent Reimagining Policing and Public Safety Task Force. We are honored that Robert's also moving hearts and mountains on the Colorado Foundation for Universal Healthcare's Board of Directors. Welcome, Robert and Denise Davis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to just take a moment and say that I am a product, and this is one of the things that I do with churches and organizations when we talk about implicit bias. I am a product of my culture. In other words, I was born in 1974, and I came into a world and I began to have certain things written onto the computer of my mind, on television, on from my family, little things from school, little things such as, quit crying like a little girl, or other things, boys don't act like that. These are things that were just pre-programmed into my computer without me being aware. And then I did something else. I clicked on the television and I saw TV shows. Some of the older ones were still being played, like Superman and Gunsmoke. Then there were the newer ones that were my age: Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers. And they had certain messages that were undercurrents in the messages about how women were supposed to be viewed, how men were supposed to be viewed, about roles, responsibilities. And then I started watching the A-Team and Knight Rider, and the list goes on. All these shows that every little boy who was a product of the 80s and who came of age in the late 80s, early 90s, all of us were watching. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I have been doing an intense study within my own life to identify the messages that I have received that has produced the sexism that I have been wrestling with, that I wasn't even aware existed. If you asked me, I would have said, I'm not a sexist. I can't be a sexist. Why? I have a mother. I have sisters, a sister, sorry. I have a wife. I have 3 daughters, 4 granddaughters. Tell me, how can I be a sexist with all of these females in my life? And it's not a condemnation, it's a journey. In other words, you're not condemned because you were born into a particular world or to a particular reality, but it is a journey that says, I want to recognize what those realities are that I was born into and what were the messages that I was pre-programmed with. And so my part as I close is to encourage you to do something. As we talk about bringing about equality and equity through healthcare, each of us needs to go on a personal journey. And I want to encourage you to do 2 things, and then I'm going to turn it over to my wife, Denise. And that is, identify the biases that we are pre-programmed with. For instance, I was asked a question one time as I was presenting to a Caucasian church. And the question was, what was the most racist thing that I ever experienced growing up as a Christian? And my response was, and I know this shocked people because I know they thought I was going to say something like, when I went to camp, one of the camp directors said this or did that or something or the other. But what I said was, well, the most racist thing was that all of the children's stories, all of the biblical stories all of the Moses, Abraham, all of the Bible characters were Caucasian. In other words, there were no African Americans, no Asians, no Latinx that were a part of the divine story, the story of God. That's the most racist thing that I experienced. And that's the world that most of us were born into. So one of the things I want to encourage you to do is just to identify the biases and the racial messages that were placed onto your computer without you having any knowledge that it was being put there, or without you doing anything overtly to have it placed there. That is one of the first steps. The second thing is, I want you to identify how you benefit from privilege and the areas of privilege. This is where it's going to take honest internal reflection. How do I benefit from being a man? There are certain things when I walk into a room as a man, I can walk through the park at 2:00 in the morning as a man with no worries, other than maybe a mugger might come out and rob me or something silly like that. But no concerns about losing my innocence and my dignity. These are privileges that I have, and what are those privileges that I don't want to lose? Again, this is questions that I ask myself. What are the privileges that I have? What are the privileges that I really am not ready to give up? What is it about being a man that I'm not ready to turn over? When you enter into a room and people don't know who's in charge, if you are the man in the room or you're one of the men in the room, people begin to just kind of look to see, are you the one that's leading out the meeting today? It's already these pre-programmed things inside of us. And so I want to encourage you, those of you who are men, to go on this journey with me. Most men, we need to go on a twofold journey, sexism and racism. And then I want to encourage everyone here to go on that journey of racism. What was pre-programmed? What do I benefit being a white in this world? And what are the privileges that I really would not like to give up being white in this world? I want to transition to healthcare and try to bridge the gap. My wife, Dr. Denise Davis, is a speech language pathologist, and she's going to tell a story about her life, and I'll turn it over to her, Denise.
Thank you, everyone, for having me today. And thank you for indulging me and allowing me to present, even though I'm not a regular member of this committee. But in talking, we talk a lot about world and our worldviews, including healthcare. And so Robert has asked me today to come and just share my story and my testimony and just kind of give some light as to how healthcare has impacted me over the years. So I came to this country when I was 10 years old, and for all the psychological reasons for, a child coming from a bigger family to a single parent home, so many things happened, and I got pregnant when I was 14 years old. With that, I went into a maternity shelter at the New York Foundling Hospital on the Avenues of the Americas, 6th Avenue in New York City. And from there, that was a whole new world of healthcare experience for me. Of course, you're at that age with that experience, you are placed on Medicaid and you receive all the benefits of, healthy checks, wellness checks, having to go to the hospital and have a child without having the financial burdens that come after it. Even through high school, I went into what they call a mother and child shelter, where they help you matriculate through school and help you establish your goals and meet those goals. And with that, continued healthcare. With the Medicaid, we had a doctor who came in on site to give all the children their wellness checks and immunizations or everything they needed. And they also helped us find doctors and helped us to maintain our health, whether it's medical, dental, vision. And so my experience with that Medicaid universal healthcare was actually quite good. And even as I started working and I was no longer qualified for that universal care, my daughter continued to qualify even as I went through college. So I was able to finish college without the lingering debt of medical debt. What my experience with that was when I transitioned out and started working to the point where my daughter no longer needed that universal care as well,
Or qualified.
or qualified for that universal care. That's when the jarring reality of healthcare really hit me, because it was quite expensive to maintain all the things that has been done under Medicaid. And one of the things that people talk about when they talk about Medicaid and Medicare, a lot of times people talk about fraud, or they talk about not enough healthcare providers, or you get unnecessary treatments. I have never experienced that. I have never experienced where there were providers or there was a lack of providers. I have never experienced where I've been given treatments or been counseled to get treatments that I should never have gotten. I have never been counseled, or treatment has never been withheld from me because I had Medicare. And I had my daughter at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City, where Medicaid covered it. So there were some arguments around, and I hear it in the news, the arguments around, the impact of what universal healthcare will do, and that it will break the system. Well, I also have on the other side, when you are working a full-time job and when you are contributing to a healthcare and having to purchase it through your employer, what that does as well, and how that impacts your income. Comparing my experience with the universal care with having had 2 children after, it was crippling, the bills that you get after. But even also, if you don't have you're tiered, I think, based on what you have is what you get. So with a universal healthcare, I never experienced a situation where care is withheld or too much care is given. But on the other side, I've had great healthcare and I've had not so great healthcare, and it's tiered. So if you can't afford, like the Dr. Jacobs said, if you can't afford to get your eye examined because you have hypertension, you won't get your eye examined. And of course, it will lead to later health issues. But with a universal system, if I needed my eyes checked out, I got my eyes checked out. And they weren't proposing that I get cataract surgery or I get something more than I should have gotten. You just get the healthcare that you need. So I'm a big proponent of universal healthcare, being on both sides of the coin. And also now as a business owner and having to see patients who only get 6 visits or they only get 3 visits when as the provider that they need more and they can't get more. You understand what I mean? So I'm a big proponent of universal healthcare, and I will definitely support any initiative to go forward with getting that. And I hope my voice and my tiny experience will help in pushing that forward.
And so to tie it all together, in conclusion, you can imagine how difficult it is to be a young immigrant Black mother at 14, 15 years old in a large, cold city like New York. And there are many layers that, of course, we cannot address to that whole, psychosocial dynamic. But at least one thing that helped to level the playing field, and this is the one thing that would help to level the playing field as it relates to race in this country and race relations, is universal health care. So that while we're dealing with police brutality, while we're dealing with educational inequities, let's at least fix one of those areas, which is everyone entitled to quality health care as a human right. We can fix that one area, and we can fix it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you both so much. Thank you. There was a lot there, Doctors Robert and Denise Davis. What I want to echo is, well, there would be like 6 points to echo, but the things I want to say is that I want to point to is the potential that humans have to to live the lives that they can live when their needs are met, especially healthcare. And when we solve that, we've solved a great deal. So thank you so much for your perspectives. We really appreciate it. And you add so much to our board and our community. Thank you. The next speaker is a retired civil rights attorney who's willing to do anything to win healthcare for everyone. And I'm just gonna share my screen really quick. So this is James Potter, and this is him pimping on the hood of the car that he is willing to donate to the cause of universal healthcare. And so, yeah, that's Jim. I'm gonna stop sharing and not embarrass him longer. But he dedicates hours. He's to our cause using both his wicked smart intellect and similarly wicked sense of humor. Jim, I'm going to pin you so people can see you looking, like your reputable lawyer self rather than your pimping for the cause self. It's all good. So yes, Jim has both a wicked smart intellect and a similarly wicked sense of humor, as many of you know. And what I would like you to know is that if you listen well to Jim for the next few minutes, you'll understand the current Supreme Court threats to the ACA. And the reason this relates to our cause, it's yet another huge source of the urgency for the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act. And that's what sorry, Jim, that's what I really wanted to echo after Robert and Denise spoke, is that we have people dying, and we have people dying of our Black, Indigenous people, Latino people of color are dying, and like faster, almost twice as fast as the rest of the population to COVID. And part of the challenge is because people need healthcare and they need access to it now. And so this is another threat to the healthcare that some people have been able to have. Do you want to talk about that, Jim?
Sure, and thanks for destroying my career, Sarah, with that photo. So I'd like to start off by quoting Judge Learned Hand, who said that words are chameleons which reflect the color of their environment. So the meaning of words are at the center of the Supreme Court's upcoming decision on the constitutionality of the ACA. First, what is a permissible tax versus an unconstitutional penalty? Second, what is the difference between severing a particular unconstitutional provision from an otherwise valid law while leaving the rest in place? Or would that be judicial overreach in rewriting an act of Congress? Words have significance, and constitutional questions can hinge on them. So that's one basic lesson. The case currently before the Supreme Court is called California versus Texas, and it's all about these questions. How the court answers them has the potential to deprive millions of people of their health insurance, their coverage for pre-existing conditions, and millions of others could lose their Medicaid. In Colorado, 380,000 people could be dropped from Medicaid. We have to be prepared to prevent that disaster if the court decides that the ACA must fail. We need an emergency backup plan. The Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act will fill that gap while also opening up the possibility of surviving the pandemic, as well as creating a more equitable healthcare system. So let's review the court challenges in light of the Constitution and the changing composition of the court to see what the likely outcome will be. So when Congress passed the ACA, which mandated that all Americans obtain health insurance, it defended the ACA's constitutionality in 2011 by citing its power to regulate commerce and to impose a tax on those failing to have health insurance. The power to tax and the power to regulate commerce are clear sources of congressional authority. Congress also thought that the individual mandate was an essential feature of the law necessary to create a risk pool large enough to make the system work. Now, separately, the ACA also required the states to expand Medicaid, offering both a carrot in terms of federal money to finance the expansion and a stick, and that's the loss of all federal Medicaid monies if states failed to expand their existing Medicaid programs. So now let's look how the Supreme Court resolved these issues in 2011 in the case of NFIB versus Sebelius. First, concerning the individual mandate, the court ruled 5-4 that the mandate was not within the power of Congress to regulate commerce because people who failed to purchase health insurance were not engaged in commerce. There was no commerce to regulate. That's how they ruled. Second, concerning the constitutionality of the mandate under the taxing clause, the mandate was actually upheld, construing the penalty for not purchasing insurance as a tax rather than a penalty. A tax is within the power of Congress to levy, but a penalty is not under Article 1 that governs the powers of Congress. The 4 dissenters on the court reasoned that the penalty really was a penalty, taking the words of the ACA literally. That's what textualist judges do. They take words literally. Okay, third, with respect to Medicaid expansion, 7 judges held that it was unconstitutionally coercive in forcing states to expand Medicaid, but they went on to sever the unconstitutional provision and made the act voluntary for states to join in the expansion. The 4 conservative dissenters on the court all held that the majority did not just sever, but instead rewrote the act, and that is a legislative rather than a judicial function, they argued. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at what has happened since that 2011 decision. Probably the most important thing that happened is the composition of the court. Now we have a 5-judge conservative block: Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh. That's not even counting John Roberts, who ordinarily we would characterize as a conservative. But now it's solidly 5-4. That's a big change. The other change is that in 2017, the Republicans in Congress were unable to get enough votes to repeal the ACA, but they were able to get enough votes to zero out the tax that was the constitutional support for the ACA. So what happened then is that the challengers in the case that is now called California versus Texas are arguing that the zero tax renders void the only constitutional basis for the individual mandate. That would eliminate a huge part of the ACA. They also contend that severing the mandate and the coercive aspect of Medicaid expansion unconstitutionally rewrites the law. So the entire ACA, they argue, is like a house of cards and it must fall. So that's what we're up against. There is a real and present danger that millions of people will lose their health insurance and the whole system of protections for Americans in the ACA will be destroyed. If the now conservative majority of the court want to declare that the entire ACA is unconstitutional, they already have the votes. I know these are dire predictions, but they are real possibilities. On the other hand, the court could take a middle course. It could conclude, based on a 2017 amendment that zeroed out the tax penalty, leaving the rest of the ACA intact, that Congress determined that the ACA could work without needing penalties or taxes, and the court could sustain it. I don't think that's likely, so don't hold your breath. These are really dangerous times, and we need to be prepared. Let's push to pass as if our lives depended on it, because they do. So that's all, folks.
Thank you, Jim. There will be a test afterward. No, I wish I could memorize that. So next time that someone asked me what was up with the ACA lawsuit, I could sound like that. But no, it does help us all understand both what's at stake and sort of the how it might unfold. Thank you, Jim. So next is our surprise. Our US Congressman, Joe Neguse, has single-handedly restored my faith that elected leaders can and sometimes do represent those they are elected to serve. The son of immigrants, he earned multiple degrees and awards while at CU before becoming a regent there, and went on to win election in 2018 to the US House of Representatives, and he's becoming the first African-American member of Congress in Colorado history. He's had more legislation signed into law by the president than any member of Colorado's congressional delegation. He also offers these incredible, and he's won awards for these incredible service town halls where Coloradans of various backgrounds and political views come together in service for others. Speaking of service, Joe Neguse made time on his Thanksgiving week to connect with us from home, and we are deeply appreciative.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be with you live today, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to share a message with this incredible group of activists. My name is Joe Neguse, and I have the honor of representing Colorado's 2nd District in the United States Congress. And like each of you, I believe that all Americans have the right to high-quality, affordable health care. I'm proud to have stood up for that value by joining as an original co-sponsor of the Medicare for All Act this past Congress, and by serving as a vice chair of the Medicare for All caucus. At the start of this pandemic, 29 million Americans still did not have health insurance, while millions more were underinsured and could not afford the high copayments and deductibles charged by private health insurance companies. This includes far too many constituents in the mountain communities of my district, some of whom are literally paying the highest premiums and deductibles in the country. Now, in this time of joint health and economic crises, the numbers of under and uninsured people has continued to grow. The COVID-19 pandemic underscores the need for universal health care. Medicare for All builds upon and expands our trusted Medicare system. It has been a dedicated focus of mine to uplift the Medicare for All Act this Congress, and I was so pleased to see it receive a hearing in the United States House of Representatives, the first time that has ever happened in this legislation's history. As you know, the bill completely eliminates out-of-pocket costs. It would save families on average up to 14% on healthcare costs each year. In a time when both the physical and financial health of Americans is truly at stake, nothing could be more important. I have hope that this crisis will lead to a greater conversation about healthcare in the United States. And ultimately, I look forward to working with each and every one of you to make universal healthcare a reality. So thank you so much for your activism and for your commitment. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay hopeful.
Just love that guy. Thank you so much to Representative Neguse. I don't know if you guys noticed this. I thought he looked a little tired. It was really kind of him to make that video on Thanksgiving. So our next speaker is, I'm going to share my screen and take you through some slides, but first I want to introduce Christine. I'm going to find him and pin him so you all can see him. So Christine is our he's our friend, a fellow activist. He's also a regional organizer with DSA's Medicare for All campaign nationally. Well, regional sorry. Chris, we just figured out you're going to speak, but I did want to say that in addition to being an awesome guy and a champion for Medicare for All with DSA regionally and Denver, he is also a thorough and ambitious medical imaging IT manager and system administrator specializing in PACS RAS management, interfacing, and interoperability. So Chris, take it away. Chris is going to talk to us about our actions that we can take, and I'm going to share my screen because I have a slide about it while you talk, Chris. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction and for the blurb from my LinkedIn page. Yes, I work in radiology IT here in the Denver metro area. As Sarah said, I'm a member and organizer with the Denver chapter of the Democratic Socialist America, the DSA. DSA is member-funded, member-run, democratically accountable organization, and we fight for a political agenda that puts working people at the center. We see a healthcare system that prioritizes the profits of insurance companies and their billionaire executives over the health of working class Americans. We see expensive and cruel incarceration that compounds trauma, grief, and other factors that could trigger or amplify mental illness and addiction. We see drugs and alcohol treated as criminal issues instead of health issues. We see people without safe shelter, lacking clean water, living in areas that are polluted, especially here in North Denver. We see all of these things and we point the finger squarely at the ruling class. We say it's time to abolish the profit motive in healthcare and move towards a truly social system of care. We envision health justice and we see a single payer program, improved Medicare for all, as a step towards health justice. DSA has principles for the Medicare for All program. We believe that we need a single program, not a patchwork, one single federal program administered by the federal government. Comprehensive coverage, all services requiring professional will be covered, free at the point of service, universal coverage for all residents, including non-citizens, and a jobs initiative. Now we see the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act as aligned with that goal, especially in the short term in its benefits to working people. And its the most immediate form of COVID relief, empowering the government to pay to ensure that all COVID-19 relief funding goes directly to patient care, and that out-of-pocket costs are covered and the costs of those of the uninsured. So here are a few things that you can do to get involved right away. We've got a link up here on the screen and behind me, bit.ly/PASS-HCEGA. That's PASS with a capital P, and HCEGA is all capitalized. You can join an action team. We have several teams writing op-eds and letters to the editor, working on social media posting, sharing, and outreach, working on legislative action, contacting electeds across the state of Colorado, the other Congress people in Colorado, and state legislators, et cetera. Everybody we need to talk to in an elected position to advance this legislation and these policies. Social media posting is very important. As you all know, that is one of the only ways to really connect with people these days in pandemic situation. writing op-eds and letters to the editor. These are widely seen, and it's important for us to get our stance out there. So email Bill for the op-eds, letters to the editor project, Patricia for social media, and Cleo for the Legislative Action Committee. If you have any questions, if you'd like to share your healthcare story, if you'd like to suggest actions that this coalition can work on as we try to accomplish our goals, please email us at info@couniversalhealth.org. Again, that's info@couniversalhealth.org. Thank you very much. Take care, y'all. Solidarity.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And before I really appreciate that so much. Before I stop sharing my screen, I just want to say, if you have time to join one of these volunteer efforts, that would be great. If you are willing to share a healthcare story with us, either on like video or just in general, let us know. But also, if you only have time to take one action, this link at the top here, the bit.ly pass HCEGA, at the top of these actions will take you to a folder that includes phone and email scripts for calling or writing your legislators and urging them to pass this legislation. Again, it is federal legislation, but you can also tell your Colorado legislators that you support this bill and you hope that they in Colorado will also support this federal bill, and that we know our Colorado legislators are meeting to try to provide relief because there hasn't been any federal relief specifically for healthcare and in general. So we appreciate their service, and certainly passing the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act would go a long way to helping with that. So thank you, Chris. Do ask any questions that you have about any of these volunteer efforts in the chat, or you can email them to us. The Legislative Action Committee will kind of take whatever happens in our own emails and phone calls to our legislators, and what happens in the phone bank on the phone calls asking voters to reach out to them, and we'll strategize for, say, how to really encourage, say, Diana DeGette, who supports improved Medicare for all nationally but hasn't signed on yet to the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act, to do so, to really reach out to Michael Bennet, and once January happens, John Hickenlooper. So that is where we are right now. And then we have one final action that we would like everyone to take. The bill numbers, that's a great question. Can someone else please put them? There's bill numbers, I think it's 6906 is one of them, but then there's another one because there's a House number and a Senate number. So if someone else would please put those in the chat. I think it is in the phone scripts that you can link to as well. So what we're going to do next is we would like to do something to fill us up, and Kathy Blake of Arvettans for Progressive Action suggested this. So what I'd like you to do is consider what gives you hope, and I would like you to consider an answer that is between one word and 15, like a phrase. And then what you can do is raise your physical hand if you want to speak. You can write what gives you hope in the chat, and we can all share it that way. But I'd like as many of you, we'll take a few minutes right now, at least until 7:30, to go over what gives you hope. Unless, of course, nothing gives anyone hope, in which case this will be really fast. All right, I'm going to start because I don't see a lot of hands yet. What gives me hope is how we are learning that we can be stronger together, and that it is cooperation and teamwork. with people, including organizations or others that we may not always agree on everything, but what do we agree on? And how can we work together and partner for solutions for the good of all? And this is an important event for us. These Colorado groups we've been partners, we like each other, but this is the first time we've acted in committed concert. So that gives me hope. Oh gosh, I broke my own rules. See if you can go a lot faster than I did. Okay, empathy for the wordy. Chris, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. What gives me hope is the number of people on this call. We know it's going to take a mass movement to get what we want. We know that from history. Original Medicare, desegregated hospitals in the South, Medicare for All, and the Emergency Guarantee Act is a path towards justice now.
Thank you. I'm gonna, so some people have their videos off. I dare you to turn on your video, raise your hand, and share what gives you hope. And I can ask, there we go, Jean. I'm going to ask to unmute you so you can actually speak to us. You'll have to agree to be unmuted.
Yeah, just so many wonderful organizations across the country coming together. One Payer States, Physician and National Health Plan, League of Women Voters, everyone coming together.
Thank you, Jean. Keep your hands up because I don't. Diane, I'm going to unmute you. You have to agree.
There we go. I see in the chat that someone has talked about COVID has shown a light on the inherent weaknesses of the existing patchwork of U.S. healthcare. I also see COVID as having a silver lining in that we understand that you really can't connect healthcare coverage with employment, because once you lose that employment, you lose all access to healthcare. Any continuity of care that you had, it's gone. We've got to take that out of the mix.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Diane. And we have a couple of comments in the chat. Virginia Gevhart says, brilliant young people are running for office, getting elected and moving into leadership positions in Congress, i.e. Joe Neguse. Amen, and thank you. Diane says also that as more people use Medicaid, they understand the true value of having healthcare without having to worry about the cost. Dr. Davis explained this wonderfully well this evening. The more people who experience this, the more we have witnesses, ambassadors of universal healthcare. Awesome. Lene Warden says, hope. COVID has shown a bright light on the inherent weaknesses of the existing patchwork quilt of U.S. healthcare. I hope this issue will bring us together on this issue. Thank you. Jerry Vermont says, the passion of people who support the cause of universal single-payer healthcare. Amen. You all give us hope. Bill, your hand was up.
Yeah. What gives me hope is we hear a lot that improved Medicare for all sounds nice, but it's just not going to happen. The majority of people are supportive of improved Medicare for all. We want it. This is a democracy. We're demanding it, and we're going to make it happen.
Thank you. And Jeff and Christy Woolsey say solidarity gives us hope. Emily of DSA Fort Collins says collective action and solidarity in this fight. Cleo says, what gives me hope is people will come together to demand that we need universal health care and not employer-based health care. Larry Holman says, too many people are imprisoned by unpleasant jobs because they need the employer-provided health care. Yes, so anyone else want to say anything? I'm just going to go once. Oh, wait, great. I'm so glad that you want to say something, Kathy, since this was your idea, and I really appreciate it. I've asked you to unmute. There you go.
Okay. A couple things. One is that you give me hope, what you're doing to help us be together and to lead the fight, and your energy. And so I want to appreciate that you being here and is really, really giving me some hope. And also, I've been in this, trying to fight for this for like since 2007. And it just seemed like at that point that if you didn't have a direct experience with trying to get healthcare, that you were happy with what you had. Well, it seems like a lot of us are having to use it and finding out how messed up it is. So my hope is that we've reached a tipping point here where we have more people that understand that this is a problem, and that we'll get the numbers that we need in order to make it happen. So thank you, Sarah. And thank you for the rest of the team that's been putting this thing together, and all you great speakers. So lots of warm fuzzies for it.
Thank you so much, Kathy. It's been a team effort, obviously, with lots of organizations. And we are going to open it up to questions and comments now. And I didn't see that many. I did see one question that came in earlier about.
There was one earlier about how would the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act, how would that help how overwhelmed our healthcare providers are? And I think in some ways that harkens to a piece of what Maddie Jacobs was talking about, that awful statistic that there are more suicides among doctors than among combat veterans in the US. And that speaks to the moral injury that our healthcare providers face, because the good care that by and large they're giving to the people that they're working with, they know that a certain percentage of those people, they're driving into poverty because of the good care that they're giving them. And that is something that day in and day out, healthcare workers are dealing with. They sign up for dealing with difficult medical situations. And in COVID, it certainly is a difficult medical situation. As long as the pandemic is with us, we're going to have that. But do our healthcare workers have to be impoverishing the people that they care for? No. And the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act will turn that around. And that I think is a really important piece.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the other thing, people have these concerns about inadequate healthcare providers. But one of the big problems that is stressing our system right now is that people are so concerned about being able to afford care that they aren't interacting with the healthcare system until they are in dire straits and all kinds of complications have arisen that need to. Just one example in my practice was,
hey, Maddie.
I was able to keep asthmatics out of the hospital for over a decade, but in the last year of my practice, 3 people ended up on ventilators in ICUs because they could afford their inhalers. So that right there puts a stress on the healthcare system that's completely unnecessary. And if the goal of the system was, is this better?
Yeah, no, Maddie,
the goal of
turn your video back
a
on.
universal healthcare system is health, not treating disease. If you can keep people healthy, the costs go way down. That was all I had to say. Hopefully you heard some of it.
It helped when you shut off your video. I'm glad it didn't happen when you were actually speaking as a speaker earlier. But are there any other questions?
Well, I noticed one other question, Sarah, in the chat about how could we get Biden to move ahead with what he said about reducing the Medicare eligibility age to 60. And of course, we're really looking to move it to 0, not to 60. So if our saying 0 gets him to 60, that's at least a small step in the right direction. But one of the real benefits of the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act is that it will give people a taste of what having improved Medicare for all will be like in their day-to-day experience. People can go get healthcare and not have to think about, oh my God, can I afford it? Is it going to ruin my family's finances? People can just get the care that they need. And so we need to push for, and who knows how far Biden can go. And he doesn't have to make a long-term commitment to improve Medicare for all if he were to back the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act. That could just be a step that he says, okay, this is my Roosevelt moment, and I'm going to do it. Why not?
I wanted to say that one of the people that I've talked with recently who's inspired me, I hope you don't mind me calling you out, Robert, but I think you are the one that mentioned to me that you were concerned that once we had a Democratic president who wasn't a true progressive, that we would be scared to push him or to back what we really need in terms of all sorts of initiatives to actually treat every single human like the valuable, splendid being that they are, including universal health care and racial justice and equal opportunity and economic justice and all of that stuff, that there was a tendency not to lean too hard on President Obama when he was president because we wanted to support him. And we knew he was up against a lot of insane opposition all the time. And so we did. We wanted to support him, and he was up against a lot of insane opposition all the time. And those things may be true with President Biden, but I think that the lesson is to push as hard as we can for what we want all the time, no matter, it doesn't mean we become jerks or that we stop treating people with respect or we stop listening to people who disagree with us. We need to learn that as activists as much as anyone, how to, focus on what we agree on with other people and talk about that and maybe present data on where we agree before we start fighting with where we disagree. I'm trying to learn this in my own life. Like, how do I have conversations with people who think the craziest things? Sorry to say that like that, but like, there are people in my field who are pretty smitten with some conspiracy theories, and all I can think of is, well, I don't know everything, like, how am I we have to work together. How do we talk to people we disagree with and still stand for what we believe in and not hold back and not push hard enough? So for some reason that's been, it's been giving me kind of like a determination and a backbone, especially during this time of confusion and uncertainty. Like, it's not hurting Joe Biden to hold him to what we believe needs to happen in this country.
One of the things, and I'll never forget this because I was quite offended when it happened. President Obama was speaking to, I want to say it was the NAACP, but it was a African-American civil rights organization. And he made this statement. He said, instead of complaining, you need to put on your marching shoes. And I found that very offensive. And Maxine, Congresswoman Waters, went on television. She was quite offended because her statement was, does he tell the LGBTQ community stop complaining and march, or does he tell the Jewish community to stop complaining and march? But as I've had a chance to, the years have gone by and I've had a chance to reflect on it, what I want to believe that he was saying was, if the African American community marches around these issues that are important to you, then you can force me, because I can say I have to do this because 95% of them are voting for me, and we can't get reelected unless I do X, Y, and Z. So if y'all get out and march and really raise Cain, it'll give me the cover that I need. And I think that in the last healthcare debate of 2009, 2010, we did not push the Democratic Party to do what they may have wanted to do anyway, which was to threaten them and to say, hey, listen, you may lose your seat if you vote for universal health care, or we're going to stay home in 2010 and you'll definitely lose it. And we saw that they lost their seats anyway. Both the House and the Senate ended up going Republican. And so, well, I don't think the Senate did at that point. I think it was a couple of years later. But the House ended up going Republican, and the Senate had a pretty strong filibuster and everything else. But my point is, I think that we need to not back down here. This is our time to really apply pressure and to really raise Cain. Not to try to get, to try to damage people politically, but to really pressure politically. I think that, coalitions like the Democratic Socialists of America, who were strong supporters of Bernie Sanders, really are in a great position to be able to say, hey, listen, we didn't want Joe Biden as president anyway. And if he doesn't do X, Y, and Z, we can stay home. And that's how politics is played. That's how politics is played. And, to get things done, since we have a political system, we have to play the political game to some extent to get this thing. And I think that this is a perfect time for us, instead of backing down and saying, well, we don't want to, and let me say this last thing. The response is going to be, we can't do this right now because our first goal is to fix all of the stuff that Donald Trump broke. That's going to be the first statement. Then it's going to be, we deal with it right now because we have to work on, getting a stronger majority in the Senate and keeping the House. Then it's going to be, we can't work on it right now because of some other national crisis that's going to come up. We know something's going to come up. Then it's going to be, we can't do it right now because this is in the presidential re-election year and we really need to focus on shoring up our troops. So there's always going to be an excuse as to why things can't get done. And we have to say, what every successful coalition says, we don't care. This is what we want. And if you can't get it for us, then you're going to have a hard time getting reelected. That's the only way it works.
A little story in the lines of what Robert was just saying is apparently FDR, I'm sure some heard this story, FDR was talking with some labor leaders about policy that they're pushing. And he told them, great idea. Now make me do it. Let's let that be Biden's FDR moment. We're going to make him do it.
And I just want to say also, this particular campaign kickoff is about the national legislation, because it's at the national level we have the power to most effectively and quickly give healthcare to everyone using Medicare, using this act. But we do have a governor, and we wish him well, and his partner, we wish them well. And we wish all of our Colorado legislators who are working to do relief for Coloradans well. But we have Governor Polis is like this, where he ran on universal health care, but now he's pretty interested in the public option. And there's nothing, we need the groundswell of Coloradans to get something more done at the Colorado level. And we can look at that as a coalition, and we can look at that next or soon. but it's the same thing on a local level.
I'd like to just throw in one other thought, is that it seems many of you are probably involved in other organizations whose memberships might be interested in hearing more about the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act. And if that's the case, we'd love to be able to reach out you could take the information that's in the chat, and that will be emailed to you. And if you want, you could email to any of those of us on that list to talk some more about how best to reach out to your organization. But this really is a grassroots movement, as we've been saying, and the more we can reach people, the better.
Lene Worden said, how about getting our local representatives to sign on to advocate for the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act to their colleagues in DC? So that's a pretty interesting way to do that. It would be like a local resolution for the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act. We've had some really good luck with provider petitions, and we might want to take those statewide. So there's a lot of good options. We hope you'll sign up to do something to stay active. The more bodies working, you can do any level of commitment that you can find time for. It's fun to volunteer right now because you'll be volunteering for the coalition rather than any one of our groups. So just consider writing what you're interested in doing or emailing the people, and you'll get that PowerPoint. City councils could sign on, yeah. The timeline on how, so yeah, we don't know exactly about this act yet and when it's going to be reintroduced, so we can't tell you that. We will when we know more. We have heard that for sure that they're going to reintroduce the Improve Medicare for All Act again soon. But in terms of the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act, yeah, the answer is now. Yeah. Oh, and yes, the act is written until there is a vaccine that's proven safe and effective, but is also widely available. So at this point, the last piece about widely available as well as proven effective and safe, we probably are looking at several months still, but the sooner the better. Yeah, widely available or free, exactly. Yeah, there's lots of other awesome groups, and there's a lot of really good suggestions in the chat. If you guys want the chat, just email me, swright@couniversalhealth.org, and I can actually send you the text of the chat if you want to open that. It seems like we're done. Are there any other people who really want to say something other than in the chat? All right, well, thank you to all the groups that have been a part of this coalition. We really appreciate it. And thank you for being here. Woo-hoo.